What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush episode review. It is still very weird to say it. I almost just said welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's episode review. Boy, oh boy, this is going to be really hard to try to get into this transition into Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush. But besides that, today, guys, we are going to be going over episode 2 of Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush. I'm very excited to be getting into this episode with you guys, so without further ado, let's jump right into it. So, generally speaking, what were my thoughts on episode 2 of Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush? Well, I thought this was a pretty interesting episode, to say the least. We got quite a bit of stuff that happened in the episode. I mean, we got the whole introduction of a new organization that's going to be competing alongside UTS for finding and basically dealing with aliens in the form of MIK, and we got to meet one of the members of MIK in the form of Manabu Sugetsu and his cat Neanderstar. We also got to learn a little bit more about UTS, as well as meeting some other members that are a part of UTS, with one of them actually speaking in this episode, and we got to have a lovely tutorial duel just like in the last episode. And then one of the final things is that we got to have a little bit of Udius's backstory, which that was something I was not expecting at all in this episode. I was not expecting to really get that until we actually get introduced to Yugioh. But you know what? I'm completely down for it. Give me more of this backstory with Udius. But before we can even dive into that, we got to start off at the beginning of this episode, where after we saw a scene of Udius, trying to look through his deck and all the sorts and basically blocking the entire street and, getting the opening for the first time, which we didn't see in the last episode, which was very interesting to say the least. And by the way, I'm not going to be going over the opening in this video. I did it in a Sevens review, but because, I feel like an opening and ending are very important to a show, I think they do deserve their own videos instead of just trying to cram it into a review, so I'm not going to be discussing it in this video. But after we got the whole thing with Udius on the street and Yuhi helping him with his deck, we get to see our first scene with Manabu, as Manabu was actually monitoring Udius the entire time ever since his ship crashed onto Earth. And this is where Manabu was able to discover that Udius is now teamed up with Yuhi and Yuumu at UTS. And this is where we get to learn a little bit more about UTS, more specifically that Yuhi and Yuumu were not the ones who founded and created UTS, which was something I felt like a lot of people thought was going to be the case. Now, I really didn't know if it was going to be Yuhi and Yuumu who created UTS, or if it was going to be some other one and it was a hand down. Like, I didn't know what the case would be, but it seems like that's the case. Yuhi and Yuumu did not create UTS, but it was their parents who were the ones that created UTS, which is super, super fascinating. Now, obviously, a big question with that is like, who are their parents? Is it Yuga, or was it like Yuga's kid? Because, the question is this, Yuga's like children, grandchildren? Is there even a relation to Yuga? Like, there's so many questions when it comes down to this. And that's going to be probably for a while now one of the biggest questions when it comes to the whole aspect of Go Rush. How much of a tie-in is this to Sevens? What's the year gap and all sorts like that. So that is going to be a very interesting discussion on its own. But speaking of UTS, we actually get to see some scenes with Udius now being a new member of UTS. We get to see him have some interactions with the other members of UTS, as well as going on some tasks alongside Yuhi and Yuumu. And the first task that we see him do in this episode was very similar to what Yuhi and Yuumu, well, basically the exact same thing that Yuhi and Yuumu were doing in the last episode, basically trying to get back some cats that were basically stolen by aliens. And I say that with quotation marks because they don't really know if it was aliens. So, it could just be, Yuhi thinking that, oh, everything is being being done because of aliens. And they were able to run in this cat, and it seems like it's going to be a similar situation to what happened in the last episode, where, they were unsuccessful in their mission because Yuhi was unsuccessful in capturing the cat from the last episode. However, in this episode, that's not the case, because even though Yuhi couldn't catch the cat because he ran into this, metal contraption looking thing, I don't know what in the world it was. It seemed like they were on the playground, but I could be wrong. But Yuhi was not able to catch the cat, but Yugioh was able to capture the cat, so they were able to return the cat to her home. She gives her thanks, they give a bow to her, and then, they just go back home because they were able to successfully complete their mission. And when they got back, they got to have a little bit of discussion with Mr. Tazaki, a character that looks very similar to Galliant from Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s. So now that we're at this part, let's kind of do a little discussion on this, because there is a lot of talk about in regards to these characters in the tie-in to 7s, because one little moment that happened in this episode makes me wonder if these are the same characters from 7s. Now, as far as we know, we don't know if these are the same characters from 7s. Mr. Tazaki was the only character that talked in this episode, and it seemed like he talked in a similar fashion to Galliant. I don't know if this was the same voice actor that voiced Galliant in 7s. I know Manabu's voice actor is the same as Gakuto's from 7s, but I don't know if this character's voice actor is the same as Galliant from 7s. In fact, I don't think it was ever confirmed who his voice actor was. I think only the main four in the form of Yugioh, Yuumu, Yuhi, Manabu, and Zwaijo, for that matter, so the main five, and Nyandastar, they were the only ones that got their voice actors revealed. Oh, and the sheep-looking character, which we'll get into that when that character actually appears. And when it came to these characters, no voice actors were revealed at all. In fact, they didn't even do the same thing they did with Manabu, where it was question mark, question mark, question mark. They just didn't give us a voice actor at all. It sounds like it's the same voice actor, but I'm not gonna know for sure until they confirm it at some point. Or maybe it is, and maybe I'm just looking a little too much into it, or just overthinking it, to be more precise. But the one thing that I wanted to see in this episode was Mrs. Maki. Now, for people that don't know about this, obviously Miss Maki is being compared to Sushiko from Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, as people believe that Miss Maki is Sushiko. Now, the one big thing that was discussed in regards to this was her mole placement. For people that don't know, Miss Maki's mole, which is on the right side of her face, is on the opposite side of Sushiko's mole, which was on the left side. So when this episode came out and we knew that we were going to see the appearances of the other UTS characters, that was the one thing that I wanted to know with Miss Maki. Did she have that mole on the right side of her face, or was that printing that we got of Miss Maki for the first time in that V-Jump post, was that just an error? And it seems like it wasn't an error, as Miss Maki had the mole on the right side of her face, which tells me that this can't be Sushiko, because how the hell did a mole shift from the left side of your face to the right side of your face? Like, I don't even think that's possible, which then poses the question, is Mr. Tazaki actually Galliant? Is Mr. Yagi actually Nick, I think was his name? Is the gray-haired character who's being compared to Omaya Yoshiro, is that Omaya Yoshiro? Like, that has posed so many questions, or at least to me it does, and I want to know your guys' thoughts on this. Do you think this is the same character? And if you think it is the same character, why the hell does Sushiko have a mole change on her face? Like, how the hell does that even happen? And it can't just be an error, because all you need to do is look at the design of Sushiko and just basically replicate that, but just make her hair purple. That's really it. That's all you need to do, and make her look older, obviously. But the fact that they actually decided to change the spot of where the mole is at, like, I don't know, like, there's just some interesting questions in regards to these characters, if they are the same characters or not, but that's going to be a discussion for another time. But we had that whole scene that ended up happening, and this is where we get our scene with Manabu interacting with Yuhi and Yuumu. And the premise of this is that Manabu tries to disguise himself as this person who lost his dog, and he's trying to get UTS to basically help him with the situation. But Yuumu isn't fooled by this at all. In fact, she notices that there's cat fur on Manabu's disguise, so that there's no way that he has a dog, and there's no way that he is telling the truth, because he said that he has never owned a cat. So basically his cover was blown completely. So then he decides to reveal himself, and the cat also decides to reveal herself as a talking freaking cat. No, you did not hear me wrong. The cat can now talk. What the actual hell? Like, why are we now having a talking cat? Well, that's what my initial thought was, until I remembered that the scene had Yuhi's hair moving, which I didn't actually mention this in the last episode, but it seems like Yuhi has this ability to be able to track aliens, not by the machine on his UTS tracker, which I guess also does indicate aliens as well, but another way he is able to detect aliens is his hair starts to move when an alien is nearby. This happened in the first episode when Yuhi encountered Udius for the first time, and that's how Yuumu was able to discover that Udius was actually an alien when his hair stuck straight up in the air. And that was the same case when Yuhi encountered Neanderstar, which is the cat that Manabu has. So this cat is an alien, which I'm just going to say this makes no sense when you think about MIK and Manabu's stand on things, because we learn basically what MIK does. You know, they track down aliens, and then they decide to either release aliens back up into space if they think they're dangerous, or if they think an alien could live on Earth, they allow it to stay on Earth, but it has to stay in the MIK building under supervision. So basically, they're basically locked up in jail of sorts. So by this logic, Neanderstar, because it seems like it's a good alien so it can stay on Earth, you would think it would be in captivity because of it being an alien, but no, it walks around and stays with Manabu the entire time, which makes Manabu to seem like a hypocrite. Like, I know this is just a weird discussion, but think about it. Like, this cat should be either locked up or should be sent up into space again. Like, why is this cat so special that it can stick around and actually walk around the Earth and not have to worry about being in captation, but not the other aliens? Like, this makes no sense whatsoever, and that definitely needs to be touched upon, whether or not, you know, Neanderstar has a deeper meaning with Manabu, and that's why Manabu allows Neanderstar to walk about and not have to be locked up in captivity. But that's besides the point. Basically what happens is that Manabu was able to get a hold of Yuhi's cards because he basically was leaving it all about, and Yuhi tries to challenge him to a duel to get his cards back, but he is just not accepting. He's not willing to fight. And then this is when Udius confronts Manabu, even though they were trying to basically get him out of the building so that Manabu couldn't capture him. And at first, you know, Manabu is trying to make him surrender, and even saying that, you know, if you don't surrender and come with us, 80 of my men were going to basically go over the entire UTS building just so that way they can get their hands on Udius. And there was nothing that they were going to be able to do with it, because even though you have like 3 of the kitchen workers, it looks like you have 5 other members of UTS, and then you have the 3 main characters. That's not enough against 80 men basically going in with weapons of sorts, or looks like that was the case. So there was nothing that they were going to be able to do, but they were able to get out of this by having Udius challenge Manabu to a duel, where if Udius won, he was basically able to keep his freedom, and he was able to get Yuhi's cards back from Manabu. But if Manabu won that duel, then he would have to be forced to go to MIK with Manabu, and he would basically have to be judged whether or not he would go back up into space, or he would have to be locked up in captivity for the rest of his life. So that's basically where we get into this episode's duel between Yugioh and Manabu. And general thoughts on the duel? It was an okay duel. I mean, similar to the last episode, it wasn't too much. We at least got a little bit more in this episode because, the last episode just focused on, basic stuff like monsters getting over other monsters, dealing the damage equal to the difference, so on and so forth. This episode focused on tribute summoning and effect monsters, which everyone that has played the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Knows what those are, so I'm not going to even try to go into it. And if you don't know what that is, you've watched the episode, you know how effect monsters work. They have an effect that they can use, and advanced summoning is by tributing a certain number of monsters to be able to summon high-level monsters. We know how this works. But the interesting thing that came out of this duel was learning about Yugioh and kind of seeing a little bit of PTSD coming about when it comes to Yugioh, as we start to see him kind of disprove the ideal of sacrificing monsters to summon even powerful monsters, as Manabu tribute summoned in this duel, and he was shocked by this and the fact that he was sacrificing his monsters to the point where when he gets to his turn and he's able to draw a Galactic Oblivion, the easiest thing to do is summon 2 monsters, tribute those 2 monsters off, summon a Galactic Oblivion, and then you can try and go and kill your opponent. However, because of the PTSD that he's had from this war, of watching his fellow comrades being sacrificed to the war, in fact, we even see a scene of Yugioh in the middle of this war, and his commander basically sacrifices himself in order to basically save Yugioh from the war, which I guess to kind of talk about that a little bit, we got to see his commander in this episode, which is Yugioh, which I was not expecting at all, if I'm going to be honest, because, I just felt like this was something we were going to wait after we got through out of the whole tutorial phase of Go Rush, but it seems like they're doing it very early on, and I don't mind that at all. The more exposition that we get, with Yugioh and the war, and, the connection to Yugioh and all that stuff, and especially when we get to Yugioh, because I'm very excited for this character, to see stuff like this early on, I'm 100% down for it. So we got to see a scene with that, which was great. But, Manabu, weirdly enough, was the one that was able to help him get out of the little funk that he was having, and essentially looked at this as, them basically giving them his power to be able to defeat his opponents, and basically the small prize is them sacrificing themselves so that way they can give the power to Yugioh. And Yugioh decides to take this, he basically, makes a new speech about, how this improves his goal in his path towards what he's trying to accomplish, and you even see the people chanting him on. He sacrifices his monsters. In fact, the monsters give him a thumbs up, which I think was a really cool detail, and we got to see Galactic Oblivion for the first time, which, super cool monster, probably my favorite ace monster from Yugioh, which I want to know your guys' thoughts on Yugioh's ace monsters, and which ace monster do you prefer? Do you prefer Susamu Rainic, or do you guys prefer Galactic Oblivion? I prefer Galactic Oblivion. I don't know, it just looks like a super cool dragon to me, and I absolutely love it. But he's able to use Galactic Oblivion and 2 other monsters, and was able to defeat Manabu in this duel, which wasn't really shocking at all. I expect Yugioh to win his first couple of duels. I don't expect him to lose until probably when he encounters Yugioh. I think is more than likely going to be the one that gives Yugioh his first loss of the show. I mean, it makes sense. He's going to have the shock factor of realizing that Yugioh didn't actually die, and it's going to cause it to the point where he actually loses his first duel against Yugioh. It makes the most sense to me. Let me know who you guys think Yugioh's first loss is going to be against. But we had this duel conclude with Yugioh and Manabu, and because Yugioh won, the deal was settled. They had to leave Yugioh alone, so they basically retreat after Yuumu basically stated that, you might have had to deal with 8.88 million people, because even if Manabu won this duel, yeah, they had to deal with all the people of UTS, but you also had 8.88 million aliens that they also had to deal with, compared to the 80 people that they had from MIK, so they weren't going to win this battle anyway. So basically they retreat after this, and that's basically it for the episode. Nothing much happens at the end of this episode. We don't got any shot that might indicate, you know, Yugioh still being alive or anything like that, which would have really liked that they had a scene like that, but that just wasn't going to be the case. And yeah, with that being said, that's really it for this episode review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your guys' thoughts on episode 2 of Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush. Did you like the episode? Did you think it was okay? Or did you not really like this episode at all? Let me know your guys' thoughts on the backstory that we got of Udius, the introduction of MIK, you know, more information about UTS, and just your thoughts on Manabu and Neanderstar, as those were the 2 new characters that were introduced in this episode. I know the older characters were also technically introduced in this episode as well, but you know what, you know, with their whole tie-in potentially with Sevens, you know, who really cares? And let me know, do you think these characters are the same characters for Sevens, or do you believe that these characters are similar looking but are different characters? Well, I'd love to know all your guys' thoughts on this down below. But with that being said, that's going to be it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, guys, take care and have yourselves a great rest of your day. まるで蜃気楼手を伸ばした蜃気楼真っ白に染